you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Ladies and gentlemen, our latest things that makes official. Welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a fan that loves you. Doesn't judge you harshly because you're here to learn, you're here to grow, you're here to make yourself better and all the stuff.
Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind.
Today's featured author comes to us from bookstolifemarketing.co.uk. With expert publishing to strategic marketing, they help authors reach their audience and maximize their book success. Today, we have an amazing young lady on the show. We're going to be talking about her book. But in the meantime, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss One, the TikTokity, all those crazy places on the internet. The latest book out July 8th, 2025, The Story of Paco by Lynne Andia. We're going to get into it and find out the story of her beautiful little puppy dog. He's just cute as he was cute as a button, who's on the cover of her book. And of course, everyone knows I'm a dog lover, so it's hard to not feel for these wonderful animals. She's a organizational development consultant. She helps employees perform as efficiently and effectively as possible and to support their organizational goals. This might be through diagnosing, eliminating obstacles to performances, modifying culture, helping employees adapt to change, and creating an environment that supports performance. She has an MED in adult education and an MS in organizational development from 2 U.S. universities. Welcome to the show. How are you, Lynne?
I'm good. Thank you. It's a little bit beautiful weather down here in Florida today. It's not too hot and it's not too cold. So I hope you're enjoying good weather too.
Give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Okay. The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is pretty comprehensive. And they'd be able to find the book, The Story of Paco, to find how to access it, as well as some articles that I've written about organization development and organizations.
Yeah. And it looks like you've written quite a few books, a lot of them on HR and organizations and companies.
Yes, I've, pretty much about my field, which is, of course, organization development. Most people might think that more as organizational psychology, whereas you mentioned the whole idea is how do we use behavioral science and psychology to make things better at work for people so that there's less confusion, less conflict, and less of everything that, we really want to avoid.
Where's the fun in making people's lives easier? Aren't we supposed to just beat these employees down and make them work like slaves? No, I'm just well, that's what we do around the Chris Voss Show. We let them out of their cages every now and then. Or their cubicles. We call them cubicles, but they have gates. Now, you decided to write this story, kind of a departure from what you have tended to write about in your books in the past. Give us an overview of what's inside this book.
Well, this is a story of Paco's journey from birth until his unfortunate death at a ripe old age of almost 17. And really talks about, his birth in Tennessee and then his journey through several states. He went to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, to Texas, and then finally to Florida. And he talks about his experiences meeting other dogs and people and things that have happened to him on his little adventure. And so it is the story of his little life.
And tell us about Paco. What kind of dog is he? What does he look like for people that are listening to this on the audio?
Well, I can show you a picture of him. It's on the cover. He's a bichon frise. This is him.
A bichon.
Yeah. And bichon frises were our little lap dogs. They are originally from Spain, and at some point they traveled with sailors. Eventually got sort of landed up in France, where they were, the dog of kings and queens. And when they got tired of them, they became little circus performers on the street performers. And so today they're just darling little dogs that are, very well behaved, very lovable, and they're just perfect for children.
Yeah, they're really cute. They have that beautiful white exterior, and I've seen them perform. Bichons. The dog France.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're really popular, aren't they? I think a lot of people like that style of dog, breed of dog. So he lived with you. You raised him from a puppy, 17 years. That's a really good run for a dog.
Yeah, he was actually 2 months to the day shy of 17. We got him when he was 5 months old. He was supposed to be a show dog. The breeder kept him, but when he got to be about 5 months old, they realized that he had a crooked incisor, which just meant that he was no longer able to be a show dog. And so we got him in.
That's a bummer. Total bummer. But yeah, he would make a beautiful show dog. Those dogs usually do. I own Huskies, and I think those shows are fixed because Huskies never win, and they should win. But I also think that about my Raiders, who fire coaches every year. So I don't know. I could be just picking the wrong team. Who's the audience you've written this for? Who do you want this to appeal to?
When I thought about it, I thought, the audience is really for children who have a dog, want a dog, or just love dogs. And so that's the audience. Primarily, it's for children, I would say, from ages 5 to maybe 7. And then young readers at maybe 7, 8, and 9 might want to read it. And so the audience is really for, children who would love to have a dog like this, but also to be able to learn from him because, he was able to adapt, he embraced change, and he was able to balance his sad feelings with the excitement of meeting new friends and having new adventures. And, if an older child reads it for himself, he may be able to relate to the feelings that the dog expresses as he experiences these new, adventures. And if you're an adult reading it to a young child, you could be able to use it to really prompt conversation with your children about kindness and resilience and the universal feelings of jealousy, the fear of change, and the joy of making new friends.
I remember when I was a kid, when I was a young child, we had a boxer. He was quite big. He was a little bit, he could barrel his way around. And then someone stole him one time when we left for Christmas vacation. And it was a purebred boxer, so I guess they wanted some money or something. But we never got another dog, and I fell in love with remember the Benji series, For Love of Benji and all that? Going on? Yeah, I became a real big Benji fanatic, and I just thought the dog was so amazing. And so, yeah, it was quite the thing. And I fell in love with younger dogs, but then as they grow older, I don't know, for some reason I fell in love with wolves. So it's kind of rolled on that one. And I've regretted it ever since. No, I'm just kidding. The fur is lovely. I love waking up with a mouthful of fur and fur in my coffee cup, but it's a labor of love. But yeah, these little dogs sure are cute. So would you call this a memoir of you, or a memoir of you and your dog, or a memoir of your dog? How would you frame this?
A memoir is written in the first person, and it's a work of nonfiction. So it's based on the author's experiences. And Paco writes it from his perspective. So I guess the question is Paco the author? And I think he is. So yes, it is a memoir. Every new state that he traveled to is a new chapter, figuratively and literally, in Paco's life. And, that's where he gains his experience to tell this story.
And 17 years. I mean, what a journey. And did you just have him during that time, or did you have other dogs?
I only had Paco. He was the fella.
He's the main dog, spoiled rotten, probably, because he got everything.
Yes.
But 17 years is a good run. The oldest husky I've gotten to do is just shy of 17. And then I think my other one was like 14. And then my last one was 10. And then the other two are approaching 10. So it's really tough that you can spend as much time with these dogs, and they just get right into your heart like nothing else, because they have unconditional love. And they're hard when you lose them. It's a lot of grief. I mean, there's some people that surmise that it's harder to lose a dog than it is another person, because people can be kind of jerks. You're like, well, I love them, but there was that jerk part. But dogs are just 100% love. Other than maybe eating a shoe of yours every now and then, or chewing something up, or pooping on the bed, or something out of their wild stuff that sometimes they pull. They're just the greatest. And even then, they're sorry for it, usually. So, yeah, except in puppy phase, they just have to chew everything.
Right.
So what do you find when you wrote the book that helps people with responses to change in dogs and people. How does that apply?
I found that, for dogs, as you know, are creatures of habit. They love routine. And so, you change their routine and that can prompt some stress. And so people could be really anxious about a dog's ability to acclimate to a changed environment. And that's true for a lot of people. There's a lot of comfort in knowing what's going on. So, a dog can be, find this disruption rather unsettling. Some of them become more vocal, they become clingy, aggressive, or restless, and they can become stressed. And, there's this whole thing about resiliency. And so, the question is, are dogs resilient? And I don't really know that, but Paco seemed relatively unfazed about all this change. And, there are two things that can help explain that, I think. When I got Paco, he was 5 months old. And so he was with his mother for a long, long time. It gave him a lot of time to develop. The trust you build with this dog and the deep connection to you help reassure him. And on the way, for example, as we traveled from Pennsylvania to Texas, it was by car. Paco hated going by car, but he sat with me in the back seat the entire way, where I really could give him the comfort and the reassurance that he's needed. And whenever you experience the unknown and discomfort of change, having others who have been through the change and who can support you can really go a long way. And so, with both people and dogs, we need to provide them with attention to find out what they need to be able to go through it well.
That's good advice. Because, sometimes they're scared. Like, I remember the first time I took one of my dogs on an elevator, and she was flipping out because she's like, why are we stuck in this box and why is it moving? And, all that. And it was kind of interesting how that played out. And, but yeah, it was getting in the elevator was definitely a trip for my dog. She was just like, yeah, what's going on?
And I'm sure they hear things that perhaps we don't, because,
Oh, that's a really good point, isn't it? Yeah. I never thought of that. Yeah, I never really thought about how that's probably a thing where they go through that and stuff, huh? Yeah. As some of the other things about the book, you talk about jealousy. What does the book tell us about jealousy?
In terms of what Paco told us, he experienced jealousy because the two of his good friends expressed it to him. And, when we experience jealousy, it's because we perceive some sort of a threat. And it could be a threat to a valued relationship or a possession. And little Mary was threatened by the perceived loss of love from her owner. And it might have been about possessiveness as well. And probably the bond that she had with her owner and the fear of losing her owner's attention were the causes of her jealousy. They say that, if a dog is jealous, it may whine, it can growl, it can engage in aggressive behavior. And that was true for Mary. When she saw that her owner was paying attention to Paco, she didn't like him. She yanked him by his ear flaps. She dragged him several feet while growling at him. And Paco never went back to her owner again. He just got the message that, I need to just stay away. And it was also the fear of losing affection from Mary that another dog bit Paco on the nose, because Mary seemed to prefer Paco to this other particular dog. So, a lot of similarity there to what goes on with people.
People and not getting along there, eh? But yeah, it's what can you do? It's crazy how the dogs are. So it sounds like it's got some life lessons intertwined with it. You talk about dogs resisting giving things a second chance and what we can learn from him at giving things a second look, maybe.
Correct. And for, Paco, there were a couple of things that he tried, he didn't like, and he never did it again. For all of us, taking a chance can be scary. You might want to jump out of an airplane. It might be exciting and thrilling, or it can be terrifying. Is the roller coaster ride going to be great or not? So you don't know what it's going to be like. And when Paco fell into the pool, it was definitely unexpected. It was scary. He spurted water. He gulped as he came up for air. And so he learned, don't go into the pool. And he never did again. When he went from his loving birth home into a plane where it was dark and scary, that was another new thing for him. And he said to us he never wanted to go into a plane again. If you want to give things a second chance, you can learn from your past experience so that you can make a better choice, you can make a better plan. But obviously, Paco wasn't able to do that. He couldn't process how to make the plane ride better or the pool experience better. So he just learned, don't go into the pool. And, even though I might miss out on fun, even though when he saw his best buddy Teddy jump in, he just said, I've been there, not doing it again.
Teddy's pretty smart. I like how he rolls. So Teddy's quite a smart little boy. After 17 years, what are some other topics that adults might explore with a child or reading the book? Is it a good book to read to a child?
Yeah, I think so. For example, a lot of parents have the experience of trying to get a child to eat a different food. It's a challenge, and if they're successful in getting them to try it once and it doesn't go well, they're never going to try it again. So if someone reads a story to a child, it's really an opportunity to talk about giving things a second chance, like trying a different food a second time, or maybe trying to participate in an activity or sport that didn't go so well the first time. It's also an opportunity, I think, for an adult to talk to a child about any changes that might be going on in their life, like maybe they're going to move, or even going to school, or getting promoted from one grade to the next. Parents could really use it to encourage them to express their feelings of sadness or fear and help them do what most of us don't do during change, which is we tend not to focus on what good might come from it, but we obsess about everything that we're going to lose when we go through that change.
Good lessons of life through the book. I've learned to be a better person through my dogs as well. Any advice for people thinking about getting a puppy or a dog of the size, the smaller boy dogs there, like Paco?
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll have some ideas as well. You can find all kinds of guidance on the internet, but there are a couple of points that I'd like to make. And one is, a dog is an animal. Paco looks like a toy, but he isn't. Baby animals are adorable, whether it's a bunny, a baby elephant, or a puppy. They have enormous appeal, and they're seductive, and they're very hard to resist. We can't buy a dog on a whim, right? It's an investment of time and money. You have to spend time to, pay attention to them, to discipline them, to train them, and love them. So the first thing to keep in mind, I think, is that, it's not a spontaneous decision. And if your child is reading this book with you and the inevitable question comes up of, can we get a dog? You might want to be ready for that, right? The other thing that I really think it would be good advice for people is that don't get a puppy too young, never before 8 weeks, and the longer the better. Mother dogs really play a huge role in shaping their pups' early development. They learn how to interact with siblings and their mothers. They practice playing. They learn boundaries. A mother dog is going to teach a puppy that you don't bite too hard, or she'll yelp with them or growl or maybe stop playing with them. And that's really important for the dog to know to control the strength of his bites. And so, dogs that stay with their moms are more secure, they're more confident, they're less fearful. And so I really suggest that, you get a puppy that was with the family between 10 to 12 weeks if you possibly can. And I think because Paco was with his mother for 5 months, really helped him become a much more competent and resilient dog. Oh, and I have one other idea before I let you pipe in, Chris, with yours. And that is, you have to have patience as one of your traits. Puppies don't know what you want, and you need to be patient with them while they learn. And I'm sure Paco would suggest the same to you if you asked him. So what do you add to my points, Chris? What would you suggest to people who want to get a dog?
I would say first do a lot of research. And I love your points. I agree totally with all of your points. Great points there. I'd say do a lot of research, find the dog that fits you, and the other thing is find out if you need more than one dog or if you need a yard. Like for dogs like this, a house is okay, but I think I'm a big believer that dogs need a yard. And they don't need to be kept in crates all day. If they've got to be kept in crates all day, you're doing something wrong. When they're puppies or you're doing crate training for going potty, then a crate is fine. But there's a certain point where you don't need that anymore, or you shouldn't need that anymore. The other thing I would find out is, I have breeder friends that they don't let people have dogs until the kids are like 12 or 10 or 8, because they just don't know how to deal with the dog. I've watched, well-meaning toddlers that are, they're kind of babies. I don't know, 2 or 3. I never had kids, so I'm not good at calling their age, but they're about 2 feet off the ground, 2.5 feet off the ground. They're pretty much at the height of the dog's head. And I've seen them go up and they just want to grab and pet the dog, but they've got those little claw fingernails and they'll just grab the dog like a claw. And of course the dog, that hurts the dog and the dog will take and bite them. And then you got a little kid going, "It bit me." And it's like, well, I watched what you did. You claw grabbed them. And they just don't understand these things because they're children. They just haven't developed enough. And that can cause some real problems. I've seen dogs that they've had abuse. They've been poked at in their cage, their crates. When you try and either go in, reach into their crate to grab something, even giving them food or a treat, they'll be defensive. I've had kids come over to my house and poke at my dogs through the fence. So it's really important that you have a good setup in your home, that your family's stable too. I see a lot of people that get dogs that shouldn't have dogs. If you're overwhelmed with 3 to 4 children, probably getting a dog is going to help you not be overwhelmed. And you're bringing a dog into just a chaotic environment. And that's really hard on the dog. And it's really hard on the kids too. Like we went through this as children too, where my parents got like a little black Labrador, and I think they tried one other time with us, where they got a dog, and we promised we'd feed it, pet, and play with it, and clean up the poo, and we'll do it. And my parents went, "Yeah, we know how this game works. You're not going to do it. I'm going to end up stuck with this dog." And sure enough, that happened every time. And a lot of times, the dog would just be that flash in the pan attention thing, and then we'd be off to something else. Well, the poor dog needs love and attention. My dogs almost have a schedule with me that I have to go spend with them. Every time I get out of a podcast, we go check on them. But, having doggy doors, having a way for them to get out, to go potty, to go wander around the yard are really important. And I highly recommend it. I think that's some of the advice. One of the things I didn't do was when I got my Huskies, I didn't do research on Huskies. I just thought it was another dog. And Huskies are a whole new level of crazy and independent thinker. They're very independent. And I had no idea what I got myself into. And probably not until 6 months or a year later, I started looking up stuff, reading, and finding out that I was way off base on so many things that I was doing with my dogs. And this is why I was having problems. So do a lot of research. That's really important.
Yeah. And, one of the things about bichons is that they don't like to be left alone.
Yeah, they're very family-oriented.
I will send my dog out in the yard, but he doesn't spend much time out there unless I'm out there with him. And, so you need to take that into account.
Yeah. With Huskies, you have to have 2 dogs. It's really crazy. When I first got my first Husky, I was losing my mind for the first year. I was taking her to doggy daycare, and she's still come home just cracked out with more energy and a second wind. And I'm like, we sent you to doggy daycare and burn through all this crap, and I'm tired at the end of the day. So my friends kept telling me, they're like, "You need a second Husky. You can't have one Husky." And I'm like, "Shut up. I'm not doing that. It's stupid. That's illogical. It's just double the problems." Turns out it's not. It's the opposite. The 2 of them will go play. They'll go hunt. They'll go adventure. They'll go do all their stuff. They'll fight. They'll roll. They'll play. It takes such a load off you. But you need 2 Huskies. And then you got to be prepared for stuff like, with Huskies, you're probably never going to have to wear, if you want to wear anything black, you're going to have to take it, I don't know, out of the house and change it into a bathroom stall somewhere. But even then, it's still going to have those hairs on it. Your little bichon's a beautiful white puppy. I'm sure maybe, did you have a lot of shedding there?
Well, the good thing about bichons is that they have hair and not fur, and they don't shed. So you have to groom them. So that, that is another big chore.
Their eyes get that
yes.
stuff on their eyes.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember one of my employees had a bichon. He'd bring it to work every now and then. And it was really funny because he was like this male model and he had like this little dog, and we're like, that's kind of interesting. He was like on steroids. He's like a big guy and he had this little puppy, and you're just like, shouldn't you have a man's dog? But I'm just funning. But he had one of these, and the nose would always get all dirty in the eyes. And I'm like, you need to go cleaned up.
One of the interesting things that my breeder said, she's been breeding these dogs for decades. She told me, give him purified water. Really? She said, because if you give him tap water, he'll get little red, I don't know what it is, something red around his eyes. That's very unattractive. And she was right. I was giving him purified, and then I stopped for a while, and sure enough, he got this ugly red stuff around his eyes. And so, bottled water. So another thing for people to think about is expense, right?
Yeah.
Expense of taking care of your dog.
Surgeries and hospitals and all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, I just learned something new. We just got a boy dog for the first time out of the 5 husky dogs I have. And I was about to go get him neutered, I think. Neutered, spayed. I don't know which one's which. I think neutered. And one of my friends says, whoa, with boy dogs, there's some kind of plate that closes on them, and you got to give it 2 years. And I had no idea. I'd never heard of this plate thing. There's some sort of growth plate inside of it that needs to form, and if not, you can create problems down the road. And since I've only had 4 other girl dogs, I had no idea. I usually after whenever you can send them the first 6 months or whatever to get the cone of shame on them. They have to wear for 2 weeks. It's a nightmare. I'll be asleep at night and listen to them banging in on the door, the doggy door, trying to get through. Yeah, the cone of shame is always. I hate that 2 weeks. But anything more we want to talk about and tease out about the book on the story of Paco, or anything else you're doing with your works?
I find, obviously, I'm working with people. I'm working with people in the workplace and all the, obstacles that people have to go through. And, one of the things that happens at work, happens in your personal life, is this whole thing about change, which really interested me, and certainly interested me about, Paco and how he adapted to change. One of the things, I guess, what I'd really like managers to recognize is that, Paco's story says a lot about his heart. And managers, when they are introducing a change to their workplace, are very logical about it. We have to do this, then we have to do this, and then we take care of that. And they neglect to think about how the change is going to impact people in terms of the changes to their relationships, or to their routines, or to their insecurities, or to their sense of loss. And so, when people are reading the book, although it's not for adults, I hope one of the takeaways would be, if an adult is trying to introduce change in the workplace, how can he or she start thinking about how can I make this easier for people by recognizing that they have insecurity about change. They have a fear of change. It's uncomfortable for people. And when you're asking them to do something new, if they were really, really good at the old way of doing something, this new way now is going to cause them to step back, and they're no longer that expert. And so, putting a little bit of feeling and empathy into initiating change is really helpful. And I hope, Paco's way of saying, okay, this might be, a loss of my friends, but guess what? I'm going to have new friends, and I'm going to have new adventures, and I'm going to have a new state to visit. So I hope they can take some, really realistic applications from it and think about how they can use that in the context of work.
Learning, growing, and developing more, and you can learn through Paco. And it's a great way for children to learn as well. Mm-hmm. And of course, reading to your children is really important.
Yes.
We always advocate for this on the show. We have so many authors, so we're kind of biased a little bit. But, my mom read to me in the womb. She read to me as we grew up. She wrote to me stories in the womb. And, reading to your kids, especially nowadays, I was lucky. I kind of grew up in that era where we didn't have social media. So people had to read to each other and entertain each other. But, I understand why parents, babysit the kids with the electronic devices, but there is a time to give them some balance and show them that there's a reality outside of that other than just doom scrolling through. Can't imagine being 8 doom scrolling through the internet. Can you imagine going through the internet right now as a 8-year-old? I think you're from my generation-ish.
I tutor second graders in reading.
Oh.
And the way that school is orchestrated these days is just bizarre in my mind. It's nothing like how it was when I went to school. And each one of the children has a laptop that's assigned to him or her. And one of the reading things that we do is they go online and they select a story, and there's a narration of the story, and then they have to go back and read it themselves, and then they have to take a quiz by themselves. And it's really, I think, takes away from that whole, you read a sentence and you might stop and say, so what do you think that means? Or have you ever heard that word before? Or what would you do in that situation? So it's a little bit more rote. And I guess as they get older, the whole process changes. But it seems like they're missing out on a lot of let's read, let's talk, let's figure out what's going on here, and really have a good discussion from it. What do I know?
Well, I've learned more from my dogs than maybe they've learned from me. I think most of the time they just sit around. They're huskies, so they just sit around and go, this guy's an idiot. They're pretty independent thinkers, and they're designed to be that way so that they can stop the dog team when they're out in the wild. And, even though I'm yelling mush, they have knowledge ahead of them that tells them, hey, this is a dangerous area. I need to stop and not listen to my owner. Unfortunately, they do that with everything. So they're like, no, don't go out the gate. And they're like, I'll get back to you on that. Meanwhile, I'll go out the gate. That's how they roll. Well, thank you very much for coming to the show. We really appreciate it. Some great life lessons and lessons for children to utilize as they grow up. The Story of Paco, out July 8th, 2025. Lynn, give us your .coms, any place on the interwebs you want people to find you before we go.
It would just be my LinkedIn, and it's just Lynne Andia, LYNNEANDIA.
It was wonderful to have you on. Thank you very much, Lynn.
Okay, well, thank you, and enjoy your dogs.
All right, thank you. You too. Go to goodreads.com, folks, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, facebook.com/Chris Voss, and youtube.com/Chris Voss. You can each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next.
You listen to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever to improve your brain and your life. Or, coming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast will lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, irresistible, and consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult the doctor for resulting brain lead.
No.